Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Town and Gown. And the subject tonight, of course, is the fire of fires, or as we said, the burning, it's burning. It's just kind of neat to see the kind of turnout that we're having tonight about one of the real significant episodes in the history of our community that is a tragedy, but yes, also because of the kind of community we responded to that and made things better than they ever were before, which is probably the first steps for us to having one of the finest fire departments you'll find in any town the size of Defiance. And we're very proud of that, and I know there are some of them here tonight, and very seldom do you get the praise that you are deserved, and Chief, we're just thrilled to death to have you with us. And now, through the magic of the Tuttle Museum, I would like to introduce to you Chief Harvey Hughes. He joined the fire department in 1928 as a truck driver, and in 1931 he was advanced to chief by the mayor of our town at that time, Lewis Fretz. When Chief John Sherman died in fighting a fire in 1931, the mayor turned rapidly to Chief Harvey Hughes. He was one of the 8 chiefs that served our fire department since it was created as an organization in August of 1872. Hughes served as the chief for the second longest period of time of any chief, his 27 years being exceeded only by the 30-year term of Lewis Spring from 1888 to 1918. He served here except for the few years he spent in the United States Navy. He moved from a truck driver to a truck captain to the chief, and then in 1932 there was a change, and he had a period of 2 years that he was not chief, but then he was reappointed as chief in 1934 by Mayor Joe Crutch. He did not serve in our fire department during World War II. He served in the United States Navy, and while he was in the Navy, he received commendations from the Admiral of our fleet in the English Channel North Sea area because of the work he did in saving the lives of crew members of one of the British ships. While he was chief, he taught numerous firefighting techniques classes throughout the area of Northwest Ohio, and he taught others how to be instructors in the firefighting business. Under his guidance, the department was modernized and the city earned a Class 4 rating with lower insurance rates than it ever had before. Well, we're here not to hear so much about that, so let's get ourselves started with the fire of the fire. And I want to introduce to you Chief Hughes. Will you share with us some of the knowledge that you have about the Pressed Steel fire?
Well, certainly. I welcome everybody to our event. Come back. We have a series of historic photographs that were taken during that time, and we will try to, with my knowledge, working knowledge of the fire, bring that to life to you. And that was what a disastrous fire for our industry in the city of Defiance. Pressed steel well, see if I can get the right color. Pressed steel is located in the lower left-hand corner by the railroad tracks. It takes up a complete block. It was a sizable factory at the time. It had 400 people employed there. But unfortunately, that particular site was very jinxed, you might say. Over the years, every factory that was ever on that site burnt. Starting in 1990, or 1890, the Northwestern Stove Factory foundry burnt on that site. From there, in 1892, Defiance Machine Works had that big factory downtown on Perry Street, and they used the foundry section of it to establish the Clipper Plow Works. And that particular cultivator became very popular with the farmers out west. Their production was up to 1,000 units per year. Along with the Clipper plow, there was another individual came in and started to design beer cases and milk cases. And that company eventually pushed out the Clipper plow portion of the manufacturing, and in 1907 it became known as the Defiance Pressed Steel factory, and we have one of the ancestors of the founder, Mr. Henry Scyther, is in the audience tonight. Unfortunately, the same thing fell to the Defiance Pressed Steel, and then it burns in 1936. You can go over to that site. It's on the Columbus Avenue and Greenler Street. That particular site where that factory set is now a vacant lot. Nobody's ever constructed anything on that site since then. And the unfortunate thing, as you're reading through there, they were about to introduce a new product. It was a cover for springs, rear springs on an automobile, and they intended to add another 200 people to the workforce. This fire happened on a Saturday morning, June 13th. They had half the crew was working, and according to the paper, I used the paper to refresh my memory quite a bit. This young man, Fessel, he was the first one to the alarm box, 43, and he beat the worker there and broke the glass and pulled a lever. Those alarm boxes reported into the central fire station. We had alarm boxes throughout the city of Defiance, and when the alarm sounded, they'd know exactly where to respond, and this particular one was box 43. The young man was in the area visiting his grandfather at the time, and that's how he became part of history. Over 400 jobs were lost. They made automotive stampings at this facility, steering wheels, possibly for cars and tractors. They made a gas-powered hot water heater for a car and numerous other items. This is an early picture of the fire right here. Almost immediately, they organized their people, and they started to salvage as much of the material as they could. And they moved it out into the streets there along Columbus Avenue. And you can see it, all their paper goods and stuff from the office are stacked up here, but unfortunately the fire was so intense that it overcame that particular area and burnt all the merchandise and records that they had stored out there. According to the paper, and my recollection, within 45 minutes of the fire, sections of the walls were starting to fall down. You can see in the foreground there that the roof is also burned off. It was started by spontaneous combustion, but it spread rapidly through the building. Mutual aid. Back then, Mayor Crutch requested mutual aid from Napoleon and Holgate. And Napoleon, we had quite a relationship with Napoleon. We studied different fires and such, and I remember reading about one time when we got mutual aid from Napoleon. And the roads were impassable, so they put their fire truck on the railroad. The Wabash run through Napoleon and Defiance, and they brought the fire equipment in by railroad. But this time, once the mutual aid was sent out, Napoleon arrived at 11:45, and the Holgate crew came in at 11:50. What had happened, Napoleon had a modern, what they call modern back then, pumper, and it had a capacity of 1,000 gallons per minute pumper on it, and they were able to suck the water line pretty well dry, and the other departments didn't have any pressure to fight the fire. This is how back then, this is the waterworks back then. It's at the same spot. We had this 110-foot standpipe. They filled that pipe up. The water pressure in that pipe would pressurize the water lines.
Was that the sole amount of generating water pressure? Was that smokestack?
Yes, in 1936 and prior. Got me sidetracked again a little bit. I read an article of a famous author that stayed out at Defiance College around 1900. And that's when they had the standpipe there and pressurized the water system. The college was pretty modern back then. They had running water. But they didn't have the filtration plant there. And they said after you took a shower, you'd have to dust the dirt off of you. But anyhow, once they got the alarm, they had an electric pump. And they pumped the water directly out of the river into that standpipe. And it got so intense that they employed a gas-powered pump. And trying to keep that water tower full so they could maintain the pressure. They said that it was overflowing out of the top of the water tower. They actually estimated they used a 250,000 gallons of water to fight that fire. But that had to push the water for the fire from the east to the east side from way over on the west side of Defiance. Now this is interesting. These are the headlines you would have read out of the Crescent News that the plant may reach $500,000. I've read different articles on it. They had an insurance settlement of $50,000. There's quite a disparity between $500,000 and what the insurance company settled on. And at that time, that was the most destructive fire. But in our recent past, in 1888, we had a fire in a hoop factory, which was on the, again, it would be on the south side of Defiance, over around Chief Supermarket. And back then we had volunteer fire departments, and they had hose carts and hose reels, and as individuals had to run with those hose carts and stuff to the fire. By the time they got there, the factory was lost. And that was an impetus. Because of that fire, we had a change then, and that's when 3 of the ward fire stations were built. The only ones remaining is the east side fire station. This is kind of neat. I'd seen the picture, and how unfortunate could you be? Drive to work and forget to move your car during the fire. This is Mr. Green there from Continental, lost his 31 Dodge Roadster, and it was kind of unique. We had the original fire, and then I read the account in the paper so I could put the name with it. You can see the destruction of how the brick walls had fell in. Basically what you see in front of the Roadster is probably the cement floor. It was a large structure, and that was what was left of the factory at that point. This is another picture of, you can see the destruction in the background. The roof's gone. They're doing salvage work. Interesting thing, the factory was served by a spur from the B&O Railroad. And during the fire, they had an 8,000-gallon gasoline tank sitting there, and the railroad come in there and they had to pull that out of there. But also, within a matter of feet from the B&O siding is what you call the Lima Defiance that ran past there too. But looking at the picture, I'm not sure it'd be safe to assume if this is a B&O passenger car or else a Lima Defiance. But you can see the workers are there trying to salvage as much of their merchandise as they could. There's some of the casualties of the fire. There primarily were stamping, and you can see the big coils of steel there, the iron bar in the back, and probably sheet metal. One of the things that they did manufacture, and you can see it there after the event, there is a metal beer case that was manufactured in that plant, and they used the lightweight rod there to reinforce the corners and also the sheet metal. But it was a total loss. Any type of metal goes through a fire like that, it takes the temper out of it.
Now, did they do more automotive or more of the pressed steel commodities? Like, those were not only used for beer, but they were also used for milk and so forth?
During the Prohibition, they probably used it for milk. This particular one has the Tri-Steel Brewing, Defiance, Ohio on it. Much like any manufacturer, they probably manufactured beer cases for different companies and such. But they're, again, on the stage there for your enjoyment, there's the last patent that they applied for in 1935. That was a year before the fire, and that again was for another case, metal case. Mm-hmm. So I imagine it was a shared commodity between the automotive and the metal containers. There's an idea what the press room looked like after the fire, and you could see that the newspaper reported these were cherry red. Any of you who've ever been around machinery, you know that a lot of times those will have brass bearings in there for the cranks and such like this, and if they were cherry red, they probably took the temper out of the metal on these large presses, rendering them unusable. You can see the size of the prints. You can see the men on the far side there, his relationship to the size of those presses. It was an ongoing, viable company that was ready to expand. Now this is another picture. This is a stamping machinery. This would be for the smaller individual pieces. They didn't need such big machinery. And you can see the size relationship of that compared to one of the employees. Again, total destruction. The origin of the fire, it didn't really go into the fact of why they had a rubber hose in there. They may have made the fittings and pressed the fittings onto the hose, but that's what we suspected the fire was. It started from spontaneous combustion in the warehouse, and it rapidly spread throughout the rest of the factory. There's a picture of the smokestack there, and we had 150-pound boilers there, and it was so intense that the whistles were blowing. They were afraid that the boilers would blow up and really cause a lot of casualties and more damage than what they actually had. Again, you can see the mass destruction of the walls, how they had fell in. And it said that you know, a lot of times a big fire like that will create wind, but it also noted that it was a very brisk gale that was coming out of the northeast, and they were worried that the houses along Ottawa and Ayersville Avenues would catch on fire, so they probably had fire crews watching that. We did. I know that it's easily to get embers to float in the wind and land on things and catch stuff on fire. I know I've talked to a number of people that witnessed the fire or around at that time and seen the smoke and such. It was quite the event for the community.
I was told that you could see the smoke in the afternoon as far west as Hicksville.
Could have been, could have been. And it's a magnet, like any event, tragedy sometimes you might say, or fires. It drew a lot of people, and they kind of overwhelmed us. Between us, the fighting the fire and everything else, the people were in amongst us. Then again, it's noted that that 8,000-gallon tanker was pulled out of the area there so it wouldn't blow up. The people weren't even aware that they were in peril. And then this was taken around 6 p.m. You got to realize the fire started at 10:30 in the morning. So they've been on duty for a long time there. If my recollection would be like 7.5 hours that they were fighting this fire, trying to put out the hot spots and such. And the management was pretty well down on the city there, and they attributed it to the lack of water pressure and the antique fire equipment. Defiance didn't, they had 1920s and 1918 period fire trucks and such. The following Sunday then, the next day, there was people, they said they could read the license plates of people from out of town, out of state, and come in here just to check on this. This made the news at the time. They had to come in here and check out the fire. Then again, you can see the total destruction. You can see those little stubs sticking up. That was the base of the windows, and the walls would extend above that. During the fire, we didn't lose anybody, but after the fire, Mr. Frank Moore, age 32, he was part of the employees. They had a problem in some pit with some plumbing tank or pipes in it, and he went down there to clean the pit out. And as most firemen know, and the public should be aware of, a lot of the fumes are heavier than air and will settle inside a closed-in pit like this, and you go down in there and you impair yourself. You could either suffocate or else, in this case, the fumes were set on fire, and the workers were able to pull him out of there. The factory office workers were able to pull him out of there, but he died of his burns.
And he was the only fatality?
Yeah, the only casualty.
In the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Unfortunately, well, I'll get back to in the progression here. A lot of the Defiance factories, at that time on the east side, you had Electrolyte that was just starting up. They were located in the former Simplex airplane factory. There was a number of factories around Defiance that did stamping and such. And the management offered to use give them use of their machinery that was not in use, but the management refused. Like they say, after the horse is out of the barn, the mayor and city council met, and they passed an ordinance and to purchase modern fire trucks and build a 300,000-gallon water tower on the east side. But unfortunately, there was a number of other communities that was bidding for this particular factory, and the Marion, Ohio Chamber of Commerce offered to pay $65,000, and the management moved the factory to Marion, Ohio. We lost 40 jobs. It was stated in the article that approximately 60 families from Defiance went to Marion to set up the new factory. And this is a picture of the Defiance Pressed Steel Company, Marion, Ohio.
Now tell me, did the city of Defiance make any counter offers?
$50,000.
$50,000 to Marion 65.
No, 50, yeah, they were outbid by Marion, and the management was so down on our community that they said they turned them down and went to Marion, Ohio, and you could see that within 1 year, this is the date of the picture, it's 1937, they apparently had a vacant factory much like today that I understand you have a spec building.
Yeah.
And the factory, the people could occupy it immediately, and they went back in production within a matter of months. But that, if you get close enough on that little office, the white section there, it does say the Defiance Pressed Steel Company. There's a picture of our antique fire trucks at the time. In 1936, the Defiance City Fire Department had, there included Graham Bernstein's and a 1917 chemical truck. It was built by the Defiance Carriage Company. You might have remembered when we talked about that during our horseless carriage that the Defiance Carriage Company was very successful with this particular chemical truck. Many of the surrounding fire departments came to Defiance and bought them, but as far as modern firefighting equipment, it's not good for factory fires. The one noted thing there is the lack of mention of the Defiance fire truck, which was built in 1926 or 27, is not listed as part of the inventory of the city of Defiance at that time. I have no reason why it's not listed. Part of the money that they allocated, the city of Consul did, this is a picture of the 1937 Seagrave fire truck, number 1. It is a 1,000-gallon pumper, has 222 feet of ladders. The longest of the 8 ladders extends 45 feet. Now this is not one of those automatic things. This is one you take out and you pull it up by hand. It's not modern like we have today. It carried covers. The covers were used to cover over merchandise and such like during the fire so the ash and things wouldn't fall on and destroy the whatever you're trying to salvage. And also, many of you probably have seen pictures of a life net on these multiple story buildings. If they can't get a ladder to, they try to entice you to jump out into a net where the firemen are holding a ring around the thing, and you jump into the net and save yourself. This said that this was 32 feet long, and also in the article it said that Central Fire Station had to reinforce the floor because of the weight of the fire truck. They were afraid it would go through the floor. This is the Seagrave fire truck number 2. Oh, by the way, the other one had a 1,000-gallon water tank. On this one had a 750-gallon water tank on it, and it was a quad pumper. And they used, when they purchased it, they used it to fight fires in the city and surrounding townships of Defiance County. And you can see it, $8,775.98. The interesting thing was back then, in 1937, unlike today, there were no township fire departments in the area. Now today, if we would have a fire chief would say if we needed mutual aid, if they went out on a run, they would call Noble, Highland, or Richland and come to the station and stand by while the other people were on a fire run. But they didn't have the option to rely on a volunteer system.
So there wasn't any mutual aid agreements at this time?
Not within the township in the county, not unless it would be Hicksville. Or, well, like I said, Napoleon, Bryan, and different ones where they had the fire equipment, they would have to bring it in a long distance.
And were those documents or just gentlemen's agreements?
I think they were probably, as it said, mutual aid because of a gentleman's agreement to come to my town, so my town doesn't get destroyed by fire, and I'll respond to yours. And almost immediately after they purchased this truck, Crescent News noted that they went on the fire run out into a township. I think it was over by Jewel, and they were able to save somebody's barn with this particular fire truck. This is the water tower that was built at that time. It's a 300,000 gallon tank. It cost them $50,000. And they put in a new 12-inch water line to service the east side. Before, the water line was only 8 inches in diameter. And if you're on the east side and you know where the old Mag's cafe was, you can see the rise of the new 1 million gallon water tower right now. Every time I go by, there's a new section added to it. Yeah, they're building it now, and it should be online in 2017, if I don't understand that. I think it's at a cost of $2.5 million, so you can see the inflation rate. But anyhow, that particular fire or water tower was related to the pressed steel fire. They did that to help protect the east side of Defiance. Well, almost immediately after the fire, there was a former foreman of the Defiance Pressed Steel, Weisberger, I think his name was, and 7 other tool makers organized, got together and says, well, we have a general knowledge on how to manufacture steel products. Let's organize our own factory. And in December 2nd of 1936, they get together and form the Defiance Metal Products. And they used that $50,000 to incorporate the new factory. And by the end of December of '36, they had purchased the Marion Tool and Die Company of Marion, Ohio, and brought it to Defiance. How about the irony about that? And moved their machinery here to start up their factory. They located in the former truck factory, also known as the Turnbull Wagon Works. That became Defiance Metal Products plant number 1. There's a picture of it as it looks like today. Defiance Metal Products was essentially, we know it with the Zachridge family. Under the leadership of Martin Zachridge, they started organizing the factory, and it grew into 2 sites in Defiance. There's one on North 66, and he brought in his family, in which we know of, if you're familiar with it, as James or Jimbo Zachridge ran it, and then from there his 3 sons, Marty, Jim, and James, the 3 Zachridge brothers, ran the factory. So that pretty much from like a phoenix from the ashes of one, the other one rises, and you can see it employs more than the original 4,000 that we lost. It's like 1,200 people.
Now, as a result of the fire and the pressure put upon the city administration, once again, tell us what the direct results were of fire improvement that were done within the next 5 to 6 years.
Well, it's probably less than that. It was almost immediately. Within a year's time, you had a modern fleet of fire trucks. You had new water mains, the water tower. It essentially modernized the fire department.
And 4 firehouses?
No, 2. There was only 2 in existence. That was the Central Fire Station and the East Side Fire Station.
And that was located across from where the current station is now?
Yes, there's a parking lot there. You'll see that there's a memorial to fallen firemen sitting there, and it used some of the stonework from the Central Fire Station. And we have the East Side Fire Station, which dates back to 1890 when it was constructed. So those are the remnants of what was here in 1936.
And if we were to compare the pressure that they had by using that tall standpipe what would that compare to the pressure that's created by
Well, that
a
was,
water tower?
I was curious on that too, and I made a phone call, and the chief can probably correct me if he wants to, but currently we still maintain 60 to 65 pounds of pressure in our water lines. Yeah, the gentleman also said that now the modern fire trucks, unlike Napoleon, they have a device that shuts down so the water repressurizes. They can't suck a line completely down. But yeah, we modernized and essentially in the 1950s, that's when the township people, I helped them a little bit to organize the different fire departments around here, and we're in much better shape now. Okay, thank you very much. Like I said, take the advantage there to look at the artifacts and stuff.